Hello YouTube! Today with me the Garmin Forerunner 965. I was wondering what kind of video to make. Do a typical review of Forerunner 965 or maybe compare it to the Epix 2, which I had before about 4 months. And I decided that I would do such a comparison of Forerunner 965 to the Epix. Of course, this is about the most important things due to the fact that these are very similar watches, and these are already many reviews on the Epix on the YouTube. So when it comes to the individual issues, I simply recommend going back, for example, to reviews of the Epix somewhere on YouTube, because they are explained there in detail. Before we go further, I'd like to say that on some of the videos, especially where both watches will be shown, there will be Polish language. I also have channel in Polish, and unfortunately I no longer have the Epix to shoot them again in English. So let's move on. The first main difference is the appearance of these watches. Despite the same 47mm bezel, the Epix is more massive. It looks like a man outdoor watch. The Forerunner is more toned, less eye-catching compared to the Epix. And the Forerunner is a bit thinner than the Epix, and this is particularly noticeable, for example, under the jacket or when you put on some kind of sweatshirt. The second thing, on the back of Epix we have metal, of course, while the back of the Forerunner is made of plastic. The buttons are metal, while it seems to me that the buttons press a little better in the Epix. And now the weight. The Forerunner is 53 grams and the Epix starts at 70 grams. Sapphire version and 75-gram steel version. And believe me, these grams really feel on the hand. Forerunner has water resistance at 50 meters and Epix at 100 meters. And on the other hand, of course, you can swim in the both of these watches. Nothing that happens here. And another thing, probably one of the most important for many people, is the price, because the Forerunner is priced at 650 euro, of course in Malta. In the case of Epix, at the moment is for the steel version you have to give 900 euro and for the sapphire version 1000 euro. The difference is big because if you compare the steel version of the Epix to the Forerunner, we just have a steel bezel in the Epix. In the case of the Forerunner, we have a titanium bezel here. And the Epix also doesn't have a multi-band GPS. While in the case of Forerunner it does, so Forerunner is more like the Epix Sapphire edition. And another thing is the case of the Epix, we have immediately available quick fit straps. Those we can quickly change. In the case of Forerunner, we can also use quick fit straps, but at first we have to take the telescope off the Forerunner strap, put the telescope on by itself, and only then we can use these quick fit straps. Another thing is the screen. In the case of Forerunner, it's 1.4 inches. In the case of Epix, it's 1.3 inches. The Forerunner probably has the largest display currently available on Garmin watches now. And this AMOLED display has a higher resolution than the Epix, and let me tell you, it really shows. Especially that bezel around the screen is much smaller than it comes to the Forerunner. It really looks much better than on the Epix. And now moving generally to the devices themselves. Actually, most of the functions in these devices are the same. What has changed at first look is the interface of these watches. In the case of Forerunner, it simply looks more modern, although not everyone may like it because there are more colors, more animations, and some people may just say it looks a bit more toy-like. In Epix, the interface is a little more toned down, but this is the individual issue. What I've noticed about two watches is that the Forerunner seems to run more smoothly. I don't know if it's a matter of this new interface. In any case, the watch is a bit smoother. We have Garmin Pay, which works very well here. We have on Android the ability to respond to notification with predefined responses. Of course, it's not like, for example, in the Galaxy Watch that you can dictate answers. On the other hand, it is nice that there is something like this at all. On iOS, it is probably further unavailable. We have stress measurement, we have saturation measurement, which in my case works okay. But I only give saturation measurements on demand, because if you turn on this function, it drains the battery very quickly. We have stress measurements, we have sleep monitoring, which is quite advanced at the end, combined with the sleep score we get. We have menstrual cycle monitoring, hydration monitoring, so all such basic functions are here. In both watches, we have the ability to upload music. We can use our offline playlist when it comes to Spotify or Deezer. We can also possibility to upload our own MP3. In the case of the Forerunner, we have 32 gigabytes of memory for files. In the case of Epix, we have 33 in the Sapphire edition and 16 in the Steel version. We also have flashlight here, the one very similar to the one we had in Epix. While in the case of the Epix, it was turned on with the light button on the top. Here it's not there right away. You have to go into the shortcuts, and only there you can find the flashlight and set a shortcut for it. The watch supports touch, so here you can both navigate by touch or by buttons, and of course you can turn it off. And now coming to the sport functions, because they are more important, at least for me. Both watches, of course, have training readiness, have monitoring of heart rate variability, training status, training effect. In the case of Forerunner, we have something like a load ratio and chronic training load. This is, of course, in the state of training. This shows us the ratio of short-term to medium-term load to keep our training growth rate, and that will help us stay healthy and avoid injuries. But in my opinion, this is such an additional indicator, because the heart rate variability itself already suggests to us whether we are overtraining and whether, for example, our body is sick. I think that this heart rate variability indicator is also sufficient in terms of monitoring how we exercise and whether we are overtrained or something is going on with our body. I don't know if this new indicator load ratio appears in Epix, probably yes, but a little later. Both watches support multi-band GPS. When I noticed in the case of the Epix, the selection of satellites, that is whether we want to multi-band GPS, auto selection or just GPS, could be selected in the general satellite settings. In the case of Forerunner, I didn't find it in the general menu. This choice is found with specific activity settings. What else differs Forerunner from Epix is that if someone is a runner, runs a lot, parameters related to the dynamic of running, such as stride length and running rhythm, Forerunner measures without the use of the additional devices. In the case of Epix, an additional device is needed for this. Here and here we have the same sensors, fourth generation heart rate sensor. I decided to run with these two devices, relating the results to the belt alone. And I will tell you that in most cases, Forerunner and Epix work very similar. It's the same heart rate sensor, so it's hard to expect them to work dramatically different. But it's electronic, so it happened during this almost 50-minute run. You can see that at one point the Forerunner was wrong, for example, and at another point the Epix got lost. I'm using the Epix earlier for a long time and noticed that it also had split ups, that sometimes, for example, running uphill, it didn't manage to raise my heart rate. So this is just electronic. And despite the fact that these sensors are already quite accurate, there will be some distortion from time to time. On the other hand, I always take the belt from some intervals for some faster runs, for that reason that simply the belt reacts faster to all kinds of heart rate changes than the watch. So I personally don't have much to complain about when it comes to the heart rate sensor in both Forerunner and Epix. But I would like to point out that simply some distortion in the case of heart rate can happen. In the case of GPS, I can tell you that these watches work very well. Here, both Epix and Forerunner don't work on walls, on buildings. From what I noticed, and it looks very good. The GPS is very accurate, and those differences between one watch and another are very small in terms of the distance they show. When it comes to the sports modes, I suspect that due to the fact that Epix has water resistance up to 100 meters, there are more sports related to water, such as surfing, kitesurfing. So if you are a fan of water sports, here you will find more such things for you in the Epix. Both watches have maps. There is a built-in topographical map of Europe, but certainly the advantage in the case of Forerunner is that the screen is larger, so this map is simply better visible. There is a much better use of space when it comes to maps. In both cases, we have the option to uploading our own courses. I recently, when I was running to Valletta and back, I used this course to be sure that I was running well, because in the case of the turn near Valletta, the road was a bit twisty. And now the battery. Here Garmin reports that in case of Forerunner it is 23 days in gestures mode, in the case of Epix it is 16. I didn't use Epix in gestures mode, I only use it in always on display mode, and in the case of Epix it was such 5-6 days. With the Forerunner in always on display mode, it is usually 6 days of battery life, of course taking account also training during the day. I will tell you exactly how it looks like. Sleep monitoring at night, in my case, 1-2%. 1 hour training, about 5%. So I will say this: if someone doesn't exercise, uses this watch only in watch mode plus sleep monitoring, then 20 days in gestures mode actually is a chance to do. That's what I think, because that's more or less how my battery percentage were dropping. I didn't use this watch 20 days either, just a few days in such of mode, but at the moment you add the workout, well, about 10% of battery per day will going down in this gestures mode. So about 10 days the watch should last. Maybe if this training is not every day, you will get to 13 days in gestures mode. On the other hand, with always on display, I usually went down around 17 to a maximum 20% battery. With training, of course, so without training, these 7 days should actually make it here. When should be noted is the Epix, according to Garmin, lasts longer in GPS mode. 42 hours, while the Forerunner 32 hours in GPS mode. So if someone works a lot in the mountains, climb a lot, runs, ultra runs, well, here you have to keep in mind that. And now, actually what to buy, Forerunner or Epix? It depends on your preferences. In fact, all of this material could be shortened to the fact that these are very similar watches, primarily with a changed interface and slightly different design. I switched from Epix to Forerunner 965 mainly because I'm a woman and simply Forerunner is a bit more delicate. It looks better on my hand for me. It's also lighter, so to me it just runs better, works better. And that was really the main reason. Probably if the Forerunner didn't have the features that the Epix has and didn't have AMOLED screen, I wouldn't have changed these watches. When I bought the Epix, there was actually nothing with AMOLED as advanced in terms of sport functions as the Forerunner 965 has now. I will tell you, it's really already your individual matter, because when it comes to advanced, these watches are very similar. So Garmin Forerunner 965 or Epix is really up to you. What kind of watch you really want to have and how much money you really want to spend. Because in fact, I think you will be happy with both. So that's all I want to tell you. I will be saying goodbye to you. See you in my next videos. Bye.